My name is Jason, and this is Fear of a Black Dragon, an old school RPG podcast. Listeners, you may be asking yourself, what is going on? Where is Tom? What is happening? What is life? I am here to tell you that Tom is fine, as far as I know, but he is out of pocket for a few weeks, and that means we have a gap in our release schedule for Fear of a Black Dragon. You may recall, on the last episode, toward the end, I talked briefly about a game we are publishing in the Gauntlet called Trophy Gold. And the pitch of Trophy Gold was this sort of hybrid story game OSR thing, and it's such a great fit for our ethos here at Fear of Black Dragon. I thought it might be fun to use our gap in the release schedule to talk about Trophy Gold. And so I have with me today the author of Trophy and Trophy Gold. We're going to talk about both. Jesse Ross. Jesse, welcome to Fear of a Black Dragon.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
I know, the first non-Jason, non-Tom person to be on the show, right?
Wow. Yeah, quite the honor.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Okay, so, all right, here's the thing. I don't think we've talked about Trophy much on this show. I've talked about it on the Gauntlet podcast, but I don't think I've talked about it on Fear. And so before we talk about Trophy Gold, why don't we talk a little bit about the original Trophy? What is the deal with it? Why don't you give us like the elevator pitch on Trophy?
Sure. So Trophy is a collaborative story game about a group of treasure hunters making their way into a haunted forest that doesn't want them there. It is a very explicitly play-to-lose game where you go into it knowing that your characters are doomed, and the adventure, the joy of it, is finding out what their demise looks like. Yeah,
I myself have run about 17 sessions of Trophy, and I'm very fond of it. It's probably one of my favorite games right now. And not just because I'm the publisher, I truly love it. That's why I'm the publisher. To me, whenever I play Trophy, there are like two things that stand out to me. And I want to get your thoughts on this thesis of mine. These 2 points are, one, you kind of touched on them, but one is that it's a really collaborative game. It has the trappings of like fantasy, like party-based fantasy adventure, right? Like you have this group of treasure hunters, they're going into this forest. It's not always a forest, we should mention, but the default is a forest. And they have spells and they have equipment that looks like traditional fantasy stuff. And there are monsters and all that stuff. But it's really much more of a collaborative game. It's not what I would call a traditional GM player kind of structure, right? Even though there is a GM and there are players. Every die roll, you have this essentially a negotiation that takes place at the table to kind of shape the fiction, and everybody has a chance to sort of do that. And so you end up with this really like unique story. And I love that about it. And the other thing that always sticks out to me about Trophy is, like you said, it is a play to lose game. Play to lose is such an interesting and powerful concept, because the idea is we are playing to see these characters break down, to see them spiral, to see them have their descent. And that's where the joy is, so to speak. It's in that grim exploration. Is that a fair assessment of like what the fun of Trophy is? That's what it is for me. I mean, obviously it's my truth, right? But
obviously I love it. It's one of my babies, and I love it because it runs counter to a lot of the dominant fantasy RPG narrative, right? So much of what you get out of traditional games is this increasing power structure and this kind of fight to just keep leveling and keep getting more powerful and keep taking on bigger and bigger things. And in this game, you see characters who are at their end. You go into it knowing that they're going to fall apart, and that tragedy, I think, if you go into it with that sort of collaborative assumption that we're going to watch these characters fall apart and see how they fall apart and see how they backstab one another and see what it is they're willing to sacrifice to try to get the thing that drives them, most likely to their companion's detriment. There's something very freeing about going into a game where you know that the focus isn't on winning. It's just about an exploration of the character.
Yeah, I like to say whenever I give my version of the elevator pitch that it's a game of dark fantasy and psychological horror, right? Because I think that those two things are really thematically important to the game, you know? So I want to get to Trophy Gold, so I want to kind of just get the basics of regular Trophy down and kind of move on from it. But I do think it's worth talking about the scenario structure in Trophy. There are these what are called incursions, and we've been publishing different incursions in the Codex zine ever since Trophy came out. And so if you folks can get new incursions that way. And actually I've seen a lot of like homebrew fan made incursions as well that are not official, but like are just on the internet. It's a very like fan creation, homebrew friendly sort of thing, right? Tell us about incursions, like that structure and like what's so great about it.
Yeah. So I should probably backpedal a little bit and say that so Trophy obviously has this kind of dark fantasy angle, but it was based originally on Cthulhu Dark, which is also a game that I know you love. And Cthulhu Dark comes with this structure, or sort of tangentially comes with this structure, where you go on a descent. So the incursions in Trophy it's a similar idea in that you have, in Cthulhu Dark, you're sort of exploring various levels to get you closer to the end of the mystery, right? Whereas in this game, you're exploring deeper into the forest to get you closer to your ultimate demise, right? An incursion is built off of 5 rings. So those rings represent kind of the rings of a tree or the rings of the forest, though, as you said, it doesn't always necessarily take place in a forest. But the idea is that you're going deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Closer and closer to the heart of things. The 5 different rings have their own kind of thematic structure to them. But starting at the very top, there is an overall theme. That is what the incursion is all about. So that could be something like war or sleep or Oz or whatever. There are lots of different incursion ideas. But basically you take a single word and then you use that to hang everything on. So you have your theme. You also have moments, which are just little kind of vignettes or little snippets of adventure or narrative that happen throughout the story. You have your conditions, which are things that can go wrong for the treasure hunters. And then you have the rings themselves. And as I said, each ring has its own theme, but they all have 2 different things. They all have temptations and they have terrors. So the temptations are the things that pull them deeper into the forest or the heart of the incursion. And then the terrors are the things that obviously terrify them or cause them to break down or cause tension amongst the group.
Yeah, that's terrific. What I think is so interesting about the incursions and the 5-ring structure is it's really easy to write your own, right? Mm-hmm. And we've been testing this theory in Codex because we've been bringing in lots of guest authors to write new incursions and new material for the game. And I see a lot of people out on the role-playing game internet, like taking the incursion structure and kind of doing their own thing with it. And what I think makes it so easy to do is that every ring, certain things happen, mm-hmm. right? And so in the first ring, it's all about like an easy encounter to make the treasure hunters feel confident, right? The temptations are easily come by. The terrors are pretty simple to overcome, but they sort of establish this, like a sort of baseline for what's going to be happening in the incursion, right? In terms of the tone and the themes. And the second ring is like the environment, probably the more like traditional adventuring type stuff, navigating the environment. And the third ring is like the internal, like to the treasure hunters, like we explore their internal selves, right? The fourth ring is monsters. And the fifth ring is the bonkers ass finale, right? Like where we see it all come together, right?
Which usually focuses on like a more of a psychological terror, right? It's
right. Yeah.
The real kind of physical terror happens in the ring before, and so that last terror is really how far do the treasure hunters push themselves in each other, which I think is a fun twist.
I have lately been into the films of, I think his name's Ari Aster, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And the two films that people will know are Hereditary and the new one, Midsommar.
Uh-huh.
And Midsommar especially, it is a 5-ring structure, right? Like it really is. Like you can see the layers of the character's journey to this sort of like this crazy off the rails like finale, right? Which just so feels like the 5th ring of an incursion. And Hereditary too, like that very, very controversial final scene of Hereditary, for folks who've seen the movie, that is like what the 5th ring of trophy is like. It's that, right? And so I love that. Okay, so before we leave trophy, one more thing. I was chatting with Gauntleteer Garrett Ridinghouse a while back, and Garrett said something that I thought was really interesting. And what he said is that to him, and this will be kind of a segue into gold, to him, what Trophy did that was so cool is it almost like deconstructs the fantasy adventure, right? Mm-hmm. To be about theme and to be about certain narrative beats, right? What do you think about that just as a concept, like this idea? I don't like, did you intend that, or is that, fair?
It is fair. It was a little bit my intention. So one thing that came up once the Incursions started kind of floating around and people were seeing how they were written is someone mentioned, hey, I think it was actually Mark Causey said, have you seen the 5-part dungeon, which is a somewhat similar structure that has been bopping around kind of the OSR and more D&D circles. Yeah. And it actually, it's the 5-room dungeon. So essentially it takes and breaks a dungeon down into 5 different rooms with very specific things happening in each. It was interesting to see that. That wasn't an inspiration for me, but I saw it after the fact. And it was a great case of sort of convergent evolution where I think lots of people are looking at this problem of like, adventure modules are so big. Designing a dungeon can be a lot of work. How do you take what's really good about a module and distill that down? And I know that's something that you've been doing a lot of and something that you talk about a lot of on Fear of a Black Dragon. So yeah, for me, it was how do you take the story of a descent? In my case, I was thinking about it both as a psychological descent and as a physical descent, and turn that into something that provides a consistent and reproducible experience every time.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I mean, I just remember when Garrett said that to me, I just remember it really spoke to me and it stuck with me because that was my opinion of what was going on. Like it just like whether it sounds like it was quasi intentional, but the practical effect of it is the 5-ring incursion it's this really nice, I like to call this sort of gaming like going down a corridor, right? Like there's one end of the corridor and there's the other end of the corridor, but within the corridor, you can move left and right and go into doors and come out and go back into the corridor, right? There's a lot of like space for creativity, but you're still kind of on this track, right? And I think this is a great example of that. And what Trophy does is this, it's designed principally to be a one-shot. Mm-hmm. At the most, you might play an incursion over the course of a couple of sessions, but in any case, we're probably never going to see these characters again, right? Like, we get this one shot with them because by the end, they're usually dead or broken, right? So that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to tell this like incredibly melodramatic story, this very heightened story, this very like, I keep going back to Midsommar. Midsommar is not about fantasy adventurers, but man, it really, the pacing of it and the tone of it is so on point for what Trophy does. It's that, right? It's this descent. It's this, snapshot of these people's lives, right? Mm-hmm. Trophy Gold is different, right? Trophy Gold is not a one-shot. Trophy Gold is not It's not all doom and gloom necessarily. Let's swing into trophy gold. So what is trophy gold?
So trophy gold is my attempt to take what I love about the OSR and take the OSR philosophies that I love and marry those with the kind of push your luck mechanics of trophy. There's lots of different parts actually to trophy gold. It's kind of two major ones, but so it takes some of the core mechanics of trophy and modifies those so that they are not explicitly about a character on a descent. And then there's this whole infrastructure for taking existing modules and turning them into something that lets you still tell that story, the story of the module, but do it in a way that emphasizes theme and emphasizes collaboration.
I have read it, obviously, and what struck me about it, what stuck out to me, is it feels like this really terrific marriage of OSR sensibilities, but also story gamer sensibilities, particularly the collaborative aspects. It has a GM, so that makes it a little bit not quite like a lot of story games, but that collaborative nature, I think, is a big part of that. And it felt like a game that wants to do the best parts of modules or the things that most appeal to you, which listeners of this show will understand why that appeals to me. And I thought that was great. And having a pretty deep background with regular trophy, I could also see how essentially what you did was you just added essentially just enough on top of regular trophy to make it a game about, or a game with multiple sessions and a little bit of light character progression. But it's still kind of fundamentally trophy, right?
Right.
Like you can do combat now. You can't do combat in regular trophy. You can do combat now, but it's still really deadly, right?
Yep.
You can, you're in a dungeon, but the dungeon has a theme, right? You are, or we focus on the theme. And so I like what it's doing. I think that I have not played it yet, so everybody knows I have not actually played it yet, but what I'm hoping that it does is it really, really streamlines this process that I've been doing with World of Dungeons for a long time. Mm-hmm. Like I have this sort of hodgepodgey process of converting modules and making World of Dungeons work, or make the module like kind of, cram it into World of Dungeons and make that work. And what I really hope that Trophy Gold accomplishes is I have this much more like dependable system and procedure for getting this kind of play that I like to do, right? Mm-hmm. Which feels like OSR fantasy, which has a lot of the trappings of OSR fantasy, indeed honors it, but is lighter and more collaborative than this way I like to play. So, sorry, I just kind of took over there. I guess you've already kind of answered it, but like, what were your objectives in creating Trophy Gold? Like, why do Trophy Gold?
I love game design generally. I love gaming, obviously. And I've collected all of these OSR modules, and I could never find a system that felt right. With all of the OSR systems that are out there, and I think this is true of a lot of people who play OSR games, is they tend to kind of take the bits and pieces of the various games that they like and turn it into their homebrew system, right? Sure. And I mean, that's essentially what I did here, except instead of starting with D&D as my base, I started with Trophy. So it just gives me a different lens on things. So at a very concrete level, I wanted to only deal with D6s. I just wanted to simplify it and just only deal with D6s. I wanted to make sure the players were the ones doing all the rolls. I wanted things like level-less spells because I like the collaborative nature of saying, like, here's the spell and that I'm trying to do. What is the scope of it right now? How could it expand? Like, what could happen with it as I get more powerful or as I'm in a worse spot? I wanted to really make sure that if there were hit points or anything like hit points, that those were attached to this idea of conditions, which is something that Trophy has, where there's a narrative effect to the debilities that you suffer, right? And then I wanted combat to be really fast and lethal, and I didn't want to deal with a traditional character progression. So I made a list of all of these things, and I was looking at this list, and I was like, you know what, this looks a lot like Trophy. So maybe that's where I should start. And so I took Trophy and I said, okay, what are the things that narratively make Trophy more about make it work better for a one-shot, that make it more about characters on a descent or characters who are gonna fall apart by the end of this. And I pulled some of that stuff back. I kept just enough of it that there's still you're still making a lot of risks. You're still kind of figuratively rolling the dice while you're literally rolling the dice. And then pulled elements from a lot of the other kind of current thought that's happening in the OSR to influence the game, and then added a few of my own kind of unique elements to make the OSR that I wanted to play that was really about pushing your luck. That every time you go out, you're saying, I should really turn back right now, but I need it. I need that next thing. That to me is like what the heart of adventuring should be. It should be, how do I get players to make bad decisions so that their characters make bad decisions, right?
Yeah. No, I definitely got those vibes. I mean, when you look at the Trophy Gold characters, they are fragile and they stay fragile. Yes. I don't think they ever are not fragile.
Right.
They are saddled with this score called burdens. Yep. That if they don't meet their burdens after the end of an adventure, you have to retire them. Like they die penniless. Like, you know, they don't know the names. They don't know anything about monsters. They have to like figure all that stuff out as they go. Yeah. At every turn, it's like, and it's just harsh too. Like they're just, the lethality just seems like it's going to be really, really, or could be high. I say that with a little bit of a caveat because I actually think that in these more like narrative kind of collaborative systems, one of the things that can kind of save you as a character frequently is you are not just like, what's at stake is I get knocked down to 0 hit points, but rather like, you know, what's at stake is maybe, you know, your character loses the lower half of their right leg and now you have to role play that, right? Like it still sucks and it impedes them, but they're not dead, you know?
Right.
So they're not like fragile in the sense that like they're going to be necessarily like gone right away, but just fragile in the sense of like, yeah, they're doing this stuff, they're adventuring, they're doing their thing. They might even be winning, but boy, they're taking it on the chin and they are, you know, they're really like, you know, they're getting hit hard during all this process. Mm-hmm. Let's get a little granular if we could.
Yeah.
So for folks who are familiar with Trophy at least, or I should say this might be more relevant to them, but how are the core mechanics of Gold different from Trophy? Like what have you layered on top of it?
So the kind of core roll in Trophy is something called the risk roll, which is essentially what you do is you are collecting dice. You're building a die pool, a D6 die pool, based on whether you're skilled at something, whether you take a devil's bargain, which is something that comes from Blades in the Dark, which we can talk about in a second, and then whether you're willing to kind of risk your mind or body to succeed. You roll the dice, and then you're looking for your highest die, and that tells you how well you do. So that structure stays the same. Basically, whenever you're doing a risky action, you're going to build a quick die pool, roll it, and see how well you do. And if you don't like that result, you can always add another die to risk your mind or body. We call those the dark dice. And you roll those, and then whenever you get one that is higher than a number called your rune goes up, and that gets you closer to death, effectively. Or in original Trophy, it gets you closer to kind of losing yourself to the forest and becoming a monster. So that bit is still the same. Basically, for most actions, you're going to be building a die pool and making that risk roll. In Trophy, you have something called a ruin roll as well, which is basically whenever you see something terrifying or something disturbing, you just make a roll, and if it's higher than your current ruin, then your ruin goes up. That doesn't exist in Trophy Gold because it's not really about the terror of kind of confronting things in the same way. So instead, there are 2 additional extra rolls. So one is an exploration-focused one, which is really... this ends up happening a lot in the game, called the Hunt Roll, which is based on the Labyrinth move that you made for Dungeon World. Basically, that just tracks your progress through the adventure and determines whether you find a bit of treasure or find something terrible that will attack you. And then the other roll is a combat roll. So in original Trophy, you can't fight monsters. If you try to, you will just die. And instead, in Trophy Gold, you can actually fight monsters. You can make rolls against them. And it's a somewhat similar structure, but the first thing you do is everyone who's involved in the combat rolls a die to just come up with a score that they use. That's called their weak point. Whenever that number comes up later on during that combat, they get hit. So it's a way for combat to be really fast and random. And the more of that number that comes up, because you're rolling a pool, the more times you get hit. So you might have one round of combat where you don't take any injuries, and then another where you take 3. And basically you effectively have at most 6 hit points in this game. And so that's really brutal and can take you out fast.
Yeah. The caveat there is if you have armor, you can spend your use of your armor to negate all the ruin marks that you would have gotten on a particular round of combat, right?
So the thing that I love about that is you have a finite amount of armor. Basically, you can have up to 3 pieces of armor, like 3 saves to save you from an attack. And you might roll the dice during combat and your number comes up just once. And you're like, do I really want to negate just that one? Is that worth it? You know, that's where those moments of like risk taking come in. So the players are taking those risks to say like, is it worth it? Do I want to, or do I want to save this for a combat when we're rolling 3 or 5 dice and the chance of me getting taken out in one shot is exponentially higher. So those are kind of the major structural mechanical differences in terms of the dice rolls in the games.
So I imagine a situation where a combat could be over with a single die roll. I mean, easily, right? Because you're just looking for the little pool of dice that you collectively build as a group. You're just looking for the 2 highest and you're adding them up. And as long as they match the endurance of the monster or higher, and that is a number that ranges between 2 and 12, depending on how tough the monster is, then they win. And of course, if any of the weak point dice come up in that roll, then people take hits and everything. But what I think is interesting is, so let's say you do a roll, you get a couple hits, and you don't defeat the monster. You have to make a decision for yourself of whether you're staying in the combat, right? And so if you leave the combat, you give your weak die to someone else in the group to represent your absence. So now they have 2 chances of getting hit per or 2 weak point numbers and representing your absence in the game. I think it's super brilliant. It's really, really good. And I'm dying to like try it out to see how that goes at the table.
The thing that I kept thinking about while I was building up this game and building that mechanic is that old adage, like, you don't need to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the other person you're with.
Exactly, right.
Which is exactly that moment. Like when you decide, I don't think I can take any more hits, so bye guys. Like,
have fun. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's actually, like, in its way, that is very, very, that very much honors like the original Trophy, which, you know, the original Trophy is about this sort of like psychological descent that causes you to betray the group. And this is more like rough and tumble, combat type stuff that causes you to betray the group. But it's the same idea, which I think is great. Okay, so combat is interesting. I think there's a lot more we could say about all the mechanics, but those seem like some good highlights for like what makes it different from regular Trophy, the core mechanics at least. Let's talk a little bit about monsters, because I think monsters are really interesting in this. What was your thought process for how the monsters go here? So
in Trophy, you never give a monster a name. That's like a very explicit, important rule.
Hard and fast rule.
Yep, that the monsters do not have names, because the idea is that things that we name are things that we know. They're things that we understand. They're things that we can deal with, right? If we give a name to something, it crystallizes it and turns it into something that we at least claim to understand and try to understand. So it was really important that in Trophy the monsters don't have names, because they need to all be individual, unique, terrifying, singular things. That makes sense when you're just doing a one-shot, right? But when you're trying to build up a world and create a sense of kind of verisimilitude and make things that reoccur so that the world feels real, you want to have somewhat reoccurring characters, right? And the monsters are effectively these characters, right? So the way that monsters work in Trophy Gold is, well, one, they're very light mechanically, which we'll talk about in a second. But you start the game not knowing anything about any monsters. So the thing that you encounter, so you're out on your incursion, you're adventuring, you're in the forest, you come across some warty, leathery, gray beast with multiple arms, right? Dripping venom from its pointed fangs, right? You run across this thing, and that's all you know about it. You just get a description. The GM is only supposed to describe what this thing looks like, or how it's behaving, or how it smells, or whatever. If you decide to then face that, you make some sort of roll against it as a party, well, now you know something about it. You maybe learn some of the ways that it attacks or defends itself. You might learn something that it's particularly weak to. Just, someone waves a torch in front of it and it reels back. So, maybe this thing is weak against fire. You start to pick up these clues, and then you can record all that information. So one of the ways that you build consistency throughout the life of these characters is you have both a character sheet and then you have your bestiary. And your bestiary lets you basically start to track what these monsters are. You write down information about them, you write down their description, you write down their habits and their defenses and their weaknesses, and you give it a name. And that could be something like, we want to call that thing a troll because it's big and massive and brutish and hard to kill. But it could just be, we want to, let's call that thing
leather limbs
or fang fingers or whatever it is, right? Like that's what we call it, because that was our experience with it. And so you record that information down, and that sheet lives beyond any of the characters.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
Representing that like collective knowledge as people are exploring, they're gathering things, they're taking that back to town if they survive, and they're sharing that with other people. Like, oh my gosh, we were out in the forest and we fought this leather limb, and this is what it was like, so that future adventurers can learn that information and carry that forward.
And I love that, because that's what advancement is in this game, right? It's like the collection of knowledge, right? And as a side note, advancement is also the money, right? It's called gold for a reason, right? Like the advancement is like, just, are they able to scrape enough money up to meet their drives, right? I love that as a sort of advancement concept, I guess. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Monsters, so cool. So I think that the game would have been great if you had stopped right there, right? Like if you had just said, okay, I'm going to turn Trophy into this OSR thing. I'm going to use the core of Trophy to make it be about a more traditional party-based adventuring kind of thing. And that would have been great. But you've got this whole other half of the game that is about converting OSR modules. And I think this is the thing that's going to excite a lot of people about Trophy Gold. So what is, at a high level, I guess, because I think it's probably too detailed to go into on this podcast, although it's not difficult. But at a high level, what is that like converting the module? What are your goals? What are you trying to do?
So I'm just trying to make a module that I can run at the table. That's it. I just want a system for taking any module, pulling out the good bits of it, and making a really good experience at the table. Something that I can run, that I don't have to go back and pour through the book. The thing that I always run into with modules is I get hung up on this sort of the truth of it. And the fact that it has to be this thing, like I'm delivering this specific experience. the revelation for me is like, I just want to deliver a consistent experience that is my experience of the module, right? When I read it, what are the things that jump out at me as the highlights? What are the things that when I go back and tell my friends about this, if this was a movie that I saw, that I would highlight? What are the like showstoppers in the module?
Yeah.
And so in Trophy Gold, when you convert a module into a Trophy Gold incursion, you're provided with a system to pull out the good bits, to help you find the good bits, and to connect those all to a theme, so that when you play the game, that theme comes across, and it's not just a random collection of encounters, it's encounters that build up to this theme.
So let's see if I have this right, because I have read it. So the way this process works is similar to making a regular trophy incursion. You choose a word.
Yep.
That is your theme word. But instead of like creating something whole cloth like you would for a trophy incursion, you are reading the module and saying, okay, I think the word is serpents, or I think the word is sleep. And with that theme word in mind, having kind of, read through the module, you go through and you decide which bits help really emphasize that theme, that thing you're interested in with the module, right? So if we look at, some of the modules that we've covered on this show, for example, on Something Stinks in Stilton, you might have a theme of cannibalism or meat. Mm-hmm. Or cows, even, if you want to be silly, right? A little bit.
Right.
That's kind of a silly module, right? You could do that, right? With the one I always forget the name of. It's the first one we did, Scenic Dunsmith. With Scenic Dunsmith, the theme might be like spiders,
right,
or family,
mm-hmm,
or cults, right? So you've got your word, and then after you've kind of like decided what your theme word is, you kind of have to think about like how many sessions do you have available to you, and then make some decisions about like how many what are called sets in the game that you want to make out of the module, right? So we don't have rings, we have sets. And sets are discrete parts of the module that kind of flow into each other, right? And a set can be a single important chamber in a dungeon, or it could be the whole level of a dungeon, or it could be the village before you go to the cult of the reptile god, or it could be the village before you go across to the Palerskite Island, or whatever, right? Like, you choose the thing that's going to be the set, the boundaries of it, and then you populate your set with several key features. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but it's 5 things, if I recall, like traps and treasures and other things, props. And you have your little flow chart that connect up the sets, like, okay, this one goes to this one goes to this, and this one kind of loops back to this. And then that's your conversion, basically, right? You have your monsters, of course, that you have to convert, the ones that you're going to be using. But that's the thrust of it. That's basically it, right?
Yeah, I think the only addition I would say is that each set, so the 5 things are, you mentioned props, which are just like bits of scenery, traps, which could be like monsters or literal traps, things that can harm you, treasures, which are just the treasures that you find, the name, if you want to give the set a name, and then the most important bit there actually is the goal. So it's like, what are you trying to do in the set? And that could be something that you like very heavily telegraph to the players when they get there, or it might be something that they already know going into it. But it's effectively like, what is the win condition for this set to get you to move on to the next part of it, or to the next set rather. Yeah.
So I could see, for example, if we were doing The Corruption of Pelarsk, I don't know if you remember that one when we talked about it, but for that, if we were to make, let's say, a set could be the mansion with the crazy rich guy, maybe that's a set, and then maybe the village of Pelarsk is a set, and then I would probably do a set where that would be a shorter one, but basically going across the water to the island, and then I would have the island be the final set. And so I can imagine a goal with the old man would be, your goal is to get this man to tell you what he knows. And then the village set might be, the goal is to figure out what's going on here, or a way to get to the island or something like that, to get a boat. Because that's a key concern in the actual module, right? Is how to get the boat. And then so forth. So and what I think is so great about this is you can play with that, right? Like, you might want to do a full ass 5 or 6 or 7 sessions with the Corruption of Pelarsk and decide that you want to break up the island to be like 4 or 5 sets just on its own, right? And you can do that, right? As long as you have all those different parts, as long as you have the goal and you know how they kind of connect up to one another. It's so good. And you can go in the reverse too. Like, if you've only got like 1 or 2 sessions, you can just have the sets be the village and the island, and that's it, right? So I like it. I think it's such an interesting way of thinking about a module. Really, really fascinating stuff to me.
So when I was mentioning monsters and trophy, I said that when you give something a name, you understand it, right? You can at least attempt to understand it. And what I was trying to do here is say, here's a common set of terms and a way of thinking about a module that helps you understand it and helps you kind of crystallize it and turn it into something that is easily reproducible and something that's easy to work with at the table.
I think you've succeeded. I mean, I haven't tried it myself yet, but I feel pretty like I know how I work as a GM. I know how I prep. And I feel like what you've done is you've kind of codified what I sort of do already. You know, I've talked about this on the show a million times, right? Where, you know, I pull out the bits that I like. You know, I've even talked about using theme as the basis of doing that, right? And so this feels successful to me. This feels like a really cool way of approaching the module. It's got scalability, which I think is really, really something. And I don't think scalability is something that a lot of module designers think of. Like, Deep Carbon Observatory, I love. It's amazing. It's like a work of art, but you're going to need 30 sessions to play that thing.
Right.
It is a lot, right? And there's not a lot of like textual support for, well, what do you do if you just want to get a taste of it? Or what do you do if you just want to get you've only got a couple sessions or whatever, right? There's no support for that. And so I love the thinking behind Trophy Gold and what Trophy Gold is trying to accomplish in this regard. I think it's really something.
The other thing that I like that it does is it explicitly says, effectively, with any module, there's no right answer, right? Like, every playthrough of a module is going to be different. And no 2 GMs are going to go to it and emphasize the same things. And so why not embrace that? Like, you and I could take a module and come up with wildly different interpretations of it, but both of them will still kind of ring true to the original. And we'll be able to bring kind of our own sensibilities and interests to our playthrough of it. So I love that piece of it. And I could even see, as people start building their own incursions off of existing modules, that we might come up with a list where you can see, you know, what are GMA, GMB, GMC's different interpretations of Veins of the Earth, for example.
I'm very excited. I hope it takes off in that way. I want to see these conversations. I mean, I know that people are hungry for this kind of thing, right? Like, people want to experience the module without having to commit to a ton of sessions, or without having to do D&D, frankly, or whatever, right? So I would love to see those conversations. I want to see, like, how, like you said, like 2 different GMs, how they would approach the one with the spiders that I always forget the name of, Scenic Dunsmith. I'm really fascinated by that. I want to see how people approach it. And the meta conversation that I hope really happens because of Trophy Gold is ultimately, fundamentally, rethinking module design, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that would be great. Like, I would love it if it's only day 1 as of the day of this recording, and we've already seen people talking about it in those terms, right? Like, right. Oh, I'm totally, one person was like, I'm basically throwing out what I was doing and I'm going to do my module like this now, you know? And I think that's cool. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Let's talk about where to get Trophy Gold. So Trophy Gold is being published in Codex. It is in an issue called Gold. It's Codex Gold. And that is in our the Gauntlet's Patreon feed until September 15th. It's available now. It is $6. You get Trophy Gold plus all the other things that are in that particular issue of Codex. And importantly, it comes with 2 sample module conversions. Tomb of the Serpent Kings and the Ruined Abbey of St. Cloud, 2 sort of classic OSR modules. How'd that come about? How did you manage to make that work?
So both of those modules are ones that I love. Tomb of the Serpent Kings by Skirples is just a great... I mean, it was built to be a teaching dungeon. So it was meant to help people understand how to do OSR. And it's quickly become like a classic in the OSR, and so it only felt appropriate. So I reached out to Skirples and said, I'd love to do this. Would you be in support of it? And they said, yeah, that sounds great. So I took that and obviously used it as a foundation and pulled out the bits that I felt like reinforced the theme that I was going for. And again, it's just an example. So I could see someone take Tomb of the Serpent King and emphasize totally different, right? I cut out a big chunk of the dungeon because it didn't quite make sense with the theme that I was going for, and so that went away. And then the Ruined Abbey of St. Cloud is by Gavin Norman and is a part of the Dolmenwood setting in the Wormskin zine, and reached out to Gavin and told him what I was doing, and he loved the idea and was super excited to see it. So I took the first part of that adventure. It spread over 2 different issues of Wormskin, and again, pulled out the theme, pulled out the monsters that I was really interested in, and both of those are helpful in that they are somewhat about theme, though that's not maybe quite as explicitly referenced. But again, both really good examples and somewhat different spins on things, in that the Ruined Abbey is a little bit more of a point crawl, and Tomb of the Serpent Kings is more of a true dungeon.
And those conversions are included as part of the Trophy Gold release, so that's pretty great. So you could, I suppose if you wanted to, you could just straight up just run one of those right away if you want to just try things out, if you don't want to do a conversion of your own right away. Before we leave, it just popped in my head, do you foresee people like writing their own original Trophy Gold modules?
I assumed that they would, and that was confirmed on Twitter today when someone was like, I can't wait to start writing my first homebrew adventure using Trophy Gold. So, yeah, so it's definitely going to happen. And I want to see it, because just with Trophy, the level of creativity in the incursions that have been created, just because it's such a simple structure, is mind-blowing, and I can't wait to see what people will do with the Trophy Gold style of incursions.
Well, is there anything else you want to say about either Trophy or Trophy Gold? I have something, but I'll say it at the end. But is there anything else you want to say, Jesse?
I guess the only other thing that I'll say is I'm just really excited to see what people will do with it. I fully expect and endorse for people to pull it apart and take the bits that they like and incorporate it into their own games. Like all things in the OSR, it's meant to be hacked. So please take it and make cool things with it, because I want to see them.
I want to just say that, listeners, if you are into Trophy, or if you're thinking about getting into it after listening to this, you should know a couple of things. Jesse and I are doing a lot of Trophy promotion right now. We're really, really ramping up Trophy promotion because we really think this game is special and we want folks to check it out. So one thing, right now, you can get the core rules of regular Trophy for free. That issue of Codex Dark 2, is available on our website for a totally free download. So you can download it, learn how to make your own incursions, learn the basics of Trophy, and get into it completely free of charge. So by all means, go do that. Another thing I want to draw to your attention, part of the reason why we made Core Trophy free, is we are having a writing contest, and I'm not sure if it's going to be launched by the time this comes out or not. I think it will be, but I'm not 100% sure. The writing contest is basically an incursion writing contest. We want to see your original incursions. We're going to have a cash prize, and we're going to see about publishing the ones that we really love. And if we do publish any that we publish, if you want to have yours published, we will, of course, pay our normal rate for that, in addition to if you're a prize winner. But we're going to, have a writing contest to see people's original incursions. We think that'll be fun. We're going to be giving away custom dice via our Twitter account, custom dark dice with the little trophy logo, and magnets. We have great trophy magnets with the trophy logo, and it says "Play to Lose" underneath the little antlers. We've got so many cool things coming up over the course of the fall and the winter related to trophies. So if you want to get in on that, you want to get some of that free stuff, go to Twitter, follow the Trophy Twitter account. That's at Trophy RPG. Follow my personal account. That's Jason Cordova 6. Jesse's is Jesse Ross. And sign up for the Trophy newsletter at trophyrpg.com. There's a mailing list newsletter thing. Go sign up for that so that you can know when all this stuff is happening. And because we're thinking about doing a standalone non-PDF version of Trophy next year. We want to get people hype before we decide to do that. We need people to be hype about Trophy before we decide to do that. Basically, is what it boils down to. So show us that you are excited about Trophy. I think that's all I've got, though. Jesse, thanks so much for coming on the show and telling us about Trophy Gold. This has been really, really good conversation.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is like a dream come true. I listen to Fear of Black Dragon all the time, and I just am so grateful to be a part of this story. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for coming. And listeners, that's our show. Take care.